Hey everybody, Jessica here from DIBY Club, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to add or subtract length from your pattern pieces, your top pattern pieces. This also works for dresses. There's an extra step for dresses, but this is primarily for teaching you guys how to do tops. So I have a pattern here. This is the Adrian by the DIBY Club. And this is the pattern I'm going to use to illustrate this. So I have a front bodice piece, a back bodice piece, and a sleeve here. So what we're gonna do is actually start with our front bodice piece. Now, the first thing you need to do is figure out exactly what difference in height there is between your height and the height that the pattern is drafted for. So, for example, DIBY Club patterns are drafted for a woman that is 5 foot 5 inches tall. So let's assume that you are 5 foot 1 inches tall. So 4 inches difference, just to make the math simple here. So there is a 4-inch difference between your height and the height of the pattern. Since this is a top that's only covering, a top is only covering your top half, right? So we're gonna take that number and divide it by 2. So that's 2 inches. If we were a 4-inch difference before, we're changing it 2 inches for the top, and that is how much we're going to be taking out of this. So at this point, we are going to mark up our pattern. And we're going to mark it in 4 different places. So we're gonna start with the high bust. And the high bust is right about here on this pattern. So here is the high bust. Ignore this line right here. Our full bust for this pattern, and if you're lucky, your pattern will have these marked on it. The final version of this pattern does have it marked on it. So the full bust is about right here. Okay. Then our waist is down here. I'm just trying to use my quilter's ruler to make sure it is evenly across. And then my high hip is right about here. Okay. Make sure you can see that. So we have the high hip marked here, the waist, the full bust, and the high bust. Now we're gonna do something that feels really counterintuitive after you spent all your time assembling and cutting out your pattern piece. We're going to go ahead and cut along all 4 of these lines. Okay, so now I have my pattern cut at all 1, 2, 3, 4 places, right? So we had a 2-inch difference that we were adjusting for in the top. We have 4 places that we separated it. So what we're going to do now is take that 2 inches and divide it by these 4 areas, which gives us a 1/2 inch difference at each location. So I'm going to go ahead, overlap these a 1/2 inch at each point, and tape them into place. Okay, so at this point you're probably a little wigged out because everything looks really odd, right? It's a whole 2 inches shorter. That's gonna make it look really odd at first. So what I'm gonna do is first address the issue with the arm side, because this is obviously not how the arm size should be fitting. So what we're going to do is take a piece of paper and stick it behind there. This is just a scrap piece of paper that I have. I'm going to tape it down. And then at this point, I'm going to redraw my arm side. Now I have my handy little styling alteration ruler to do this, but you can absolutely do this without a French curve or anything like it. You would just freehand this curve right here. If you do happen to have one of these, it makes it really nice because what we're going to do is just line this up so that it comes all the way to the end of the arm side here, and then it meets up with the arm side on this point. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a new curve here, and there's my new arm size. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this down here, and then give this a little trim up. And there is my new arm side. The next thing I want to address is just a little these off pieces of paper right here. See how they're this one's out a little bit more and this one's out a little bit more. This is really as straightforward as you can imagine. We're just going to make sure and tape this down both sides. That one's already taken care of. And we're just going to meet these, just kind of grade them together, okay? Just try to smooth it out and give those a little trim. The last thing I want to go over is fixing our notches, because this pattern has 1, 2, 3 notches on the side to help us align other pattern pieces to it very smoothly during construction. We don't want those to be all messed up. So what we're going to do is move around our notches. So this particular set here was overlapped once in the middle by 1/2 inch. So we are going to start by moving this notch down 1/2 inch. So I've got my seam gauge here. I'm going to line it up with the one end of the notch, mark that, and then with the other end of the notch and mark that, and then go ahead and draw a new notch here. And cut it out. And then make a note to myself to use this notch instead of the old notch. Okay, now the last notch we have to address here is our arm side notch. And how we're going to do this is start by grabbing our fabric tape measure. And I want to measure from the end of this notch here to the end of where I cut off. I've got my fabric tape measure here. And I'm measuring along this curve. I know it's hard for you to see, but that is an inch and let's say 3/8, okay? So it's an inch and 3/8 from the end of this notch to the end there. And we can see where, right here, is where this separated. So I'm going to measure in an inch and 3/8, which is right there, and mark. So there's an inch and 3/8. And then the width of this notch here, it doesn't really matter, but just to be precise for you guys, I'll go ahead and mark the exact same notch here. And then draw and cut out a new notch at the correct location. Okay, so step 1 is over. Our front bodice piece has been fully adjusted for height. Now we have to head over to our sleeve because we took out some height in the arm side here. And the reason why we've split this up between the arm side, the full bust, the waist, and the high hip is because all of your length is distributed throughout your whole body. There's some of it in your shoulder, there's some of it in your chest, there's some of it in your hips. All of it is distributed evenly, so to get the most accurate fit, we need to make sure and distribute it along the entire pattern piece here. So the second section that we're going to work on is our sleeve. So what we need to do here is adjust our arm side for the adjustments that we made on our front bodice piece. Now this sleeve is not a mirrored sleeve. We have a front side and a back side to the sleeve, so make sure that you note if your sleeve is this way that you have an understanding on which side you're working with so that you don't adjust one side incorrectly compared to the other. So we have the arm side for the front right here. And I'm going to go ahead and move my bodice piece out of the way. And what we're going to do is actually adjust in from this point right here. So we moved in our arm side on the bodice 1/2 inch. So that means I'm going to measure out 1/2 inch on my seam gauge here. And I'm going to mark that right there. Okay, and then at this point what I want to do is just draw a straight line going from where we have marked down to the side of the sleeve here. We want it to come in as abruptly as possible without making a sharp corner anywhere, okay? We don't want to mess with our bands if your sleeves happen to have bands. If they're hemmed, then it's no big deal, but this particular pattern has cuffs or bands for the sleeves. So if we change the width of the sleeve here, then the cuff is going to have to change as well. So I want to try to avoid that, which means all I've got to do is just try to make this come in as quickly as possible. So I have that marked up, and I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. And the final adjustment to make on this side of the arm side is to redraw our notch here. So we're going to go back to our front pattern piece, which is right here, and grab our cloth tape measure again and start by measuring from the end of the arm side up to the beginning of the notch here. And for me, that is 2 1/4. So I'm going to set this aside again and measure in from here 2 1/4. Which actually brings me right there, right on the other side of our notch. And then if you would like to just draw a notch freehand from there, you may. I will go ahead and show you how to make sure that it is the accurate width. So I marked the width of this notch and mirrored it over here. Now I'm just going to redraw and cut my notch. And once again, make sure that we point out to ourselves, use this notch. Because at this point, if you weren't paying attention, if you don't make any notes, you're going to see 2 notches here and 2 notches here, and you're going to get all sorts of confused. So make sure that you mark which notch that you're going to be using. If you cut your notches outward, then go ahead and just trim off the first one and then add some paper underneath to cut out a new notch for right there. So that is how you're going to be adjusting the front of the bodice and that side of the sleeve. You will, from this point, go ahead and take your back bodice piece and repeat the exact same steps for the back bodice. I'm not going to do that just to save you guys some time because it's the exact same process just with the other pattern piece. And if your sleeve has a front and a back side to it, then you will need to make the same adjustments to the back side here. If your sleeve is on the fold, then you're only going to have to make the adjustment once. But if it is like this, you're going to have to make an adjustment on this side and of course an adjustment on that side. So this was showing you how to do it for shortening your pattern piece. It is the exact same process for lengthening it, except for instead of overlapping your pieces, you will of course be spreading them and then putting some paper underneath to tape them down and really add that length in. For the sleeve, if you are adding length, then instead of cutting some off, you're going to add some paper underneath it and trace it outward to accommodate the added length. So there you go. I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments or visit me over at doitbetteryourself.club, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos, and I hope to see you next time.